those houses is. We're living in a 3-decker, right? And he goes, and the kid, all of us go, oh, they're beautiful. He says, can you? And I don't know if we're on.
Yeah, we're on.
We're on?
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Then I will call the meeting of the Conservation Commission for March 1st open. And I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes for the
I'll
February
make-
16th.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Moving second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And we have a new public hearing. All right, and I will read that into the record. Under the Wetland Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40 of Mass General Law, as amended, and the West Bridgewater Wetland Protection Bylaw Rules and Regulations, the West Bridgewater Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing March 1st, 2016, in the Town Hall Conference Room, 65 North Main Street, for a notice of intent filed by Collins Civil Engineering on behalf of Arthur Kish for an upgrade to a residential septic system in the vicinity of a BVW at 599 East Street, West Bridgewater. And we're open.
All right. So start with the green card.
I get the cards.
Okay.
Thank you.
For the record, I'm Peter Lyons with Collins Civil Engineering Group, representing the homeowner at 599 East Street in West Bridgewater. We're here tonight for a notice of intent relative to the repair of an existing septic system on a 2-bedroom home, single family. The proposed system is to come out of the side of the house and to be gravity fed from a 1,500 gallon tank into a elevated approximately 20 foot by 32 foot leaching bed. Due to the high groundwater out back, it will be significantly elevated above existing grade. We are proposing concrete block retaining walls around the system that will help us, match the grade a little bit better, help with eliminating any off-site runoff, as well as keeping the work away from the wetland, the BVW area. You can see that we have a drainage way shown to the north of the project and an associated bordering vegetated wetland line indicated by the green line that wraps around the entire site. The 50-foot buffer is our orange line. The proposed leaching does fall just outside of the 50-foot, however not far enough to be totally out of jurisdiction. As far as impact within the 50-foot area, we are looking at some grading changes and the addition of a retaining wall. For the project, we propose a silt sock and fence around the entirety of the project, starting at the back of the house, going around by the dog pen, and paralleling the southern lot line up to the utility pole. Existing system is in the front, that's to be decommissioned.
What is it now? Is it
It looks like a tank to a field. I don't know what I have.
Must be really old, huh?
I might be able to dig it up if anyone's really curious. I don't know when that system is from offhand.
Yeah.
Perhaps what you can do is explain the test pit that you have up there, and that probably is a good reason for why the original system had failed.
Alrighty. Test pit 3 up by the street. We had just over, I'll call it 3.5 feet of fill sitting on top of a peat, organic layer, to a silt loam down to about 7 feet.
So the soils there weren't any good for a
Yeah,
septic
very
system.
restrictive soil, down till 82 inches. In the back, test pits 1 and 2, we found the same restrictive soil, but it wasn't as deep, So we are proposing a 72-inch remove and replace for the system, which will seat the bottom of the field in a loamy sand. Much better drainage characteristics. Across the whole site, we are working with high groundwater. Test pits 1 and 2 revealed 22 and 28-inch seasonal high groundwater. The design is to no increase in flow, to remain as a 3-bedroom design.
When you do a test pit, what is the circumference around it that you assume is the same? Is there a standard?
Well, pretty much with New England in general, the soils vary like you wouldn't believe.
In a few feet, maybe sometimes? Or?
Sometimes we've seen as little as 10 feet. You can go from a nice beach sand to something that you can hardly dig through with a machine.
Right.
Some towns, like being Easton, they make you dig extra holes above Title V because there is so much complexity with the soils.
Yeah.
I believe it's 20 feet that Title V wants the test pits to be separated.
Okay.
Both test pits 1 and 2 do fall within the system, so
Mhm.
it gives us a good idea of what's going on at each end.
Right.
Those are pretty comparable.
As long as they're somewhat consistent,
Yeah,
the
there's
two is
no
usually
significant
enough on a
changes.
repair. But if it was a brand new construction where it was a new house going up on a piece of land that hadn't been developed yet, they would require 4 holes, 2 of which need to be, the perk rate needs to be determined in 2 of the 4. But they want 4 holes because of the inconsistency. And even though all 4 of them might be pretty much the same soil, they still want that just to be certain because the New England soils are that variable. But on repairs, they're a little bit more relaxed on that regulation and only require 2 holes, 1 of which has to be perked.
Can't you make it perkable though? You can drill any test pit and say, well, I'll just remove all
The Title V requires the perk in the septic system going in that area to be where there's 4 feet of natural soils that are pervious. So you have to prove to the Board of Health that that 4-foot strata that you have will perk. So when they talk about this remove and replace, it's because maybe the first 3 feet is bad material, needs to be pulled out of there, but they still have to perk test below the 3
They
feet
do.
to show.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, sorry to,
Then they can bring in the gravel and build it back up.
Okay.
But that
I've
4
often
feet,
wondered why they do all of that.
yeah, I mean, a lot of times you might be building the system right at ground level,
Yeah.
but during the test pits, if they find you don't have a good material until 10 feet, you might have to dig out 10 or 11 feet to get into that, fill it with a nice sand. So basically you're allowing an access area for that to escape,
Sure.
regardless of where the water table is. Even if you could have, for example, with this, water at 22 inches, which puts the bottom of the system up here,
Yeah.
but you still got to give it somewhere to drain, not out the sides of the hill we're making. So,
Gotcha. Thank you.
with that being said, we are proposing a impermeable barrier around. Anytime we're worried about breakout, we do that. Help the migration vertical so it doesn't come out the sides.
Mhm.
It's
Is it
pretty
approved by the
much
Board of
it.
Health?
I don't know if it has been yet. I know last time I checked, we were, anticipating their approval. Like I said, no increases in flow. I think we meet most of the, yeah, not really. We have a couple variances going before Board of Health due to the spatial restriction. Lowering the system a foot is gonna help us with the grading and the retaining walls. setbacks to the foundation from the tank and the field, so it's just a tight site. Most of these variances do derive from trying to meet the wetland setbacks. You know, it's not that it's a small yard, but
Got
It's
wetland on
everywhere.
3 sides.
yeah, wetlands all around you,
Yeah.
so, you know, you might ask why it's not up in the front again, but it doesn't really get you any
Much.
further away.
That's
Plus,
right.
as mentioned, the soil conditions up front didn't,
Mhm.
no benefit to going up there.
Well, it doesn't matter. I was curious as to whether the current system's in failure now, or,
It is.
And the drainway is an intermittent stream. It's flowing pretty good right now, and probably most of the spring it'll be that way, but during the summer it's dry.
I'm all set.
John, you have anything to add?
Nope, pretty much covered it all. I do have a suggestion that the commission might want to consider. The green line that Peter shows on the plan is the edge of the yard.
Yeah.
And so the 50-foot buffer is already part of the people's backyard.
Yeah.
So rather than trying to put any PVC pipes along the buffer, I'm suggesting that they go along the flagged line. And I described it as the odd-numbered flags from 1 through 7. So it's kind of like every other flag would have a PVC pipe with a sign on it. And then along the back from 8 to 12 at each flag instead of skipping them.
Okay.
And I can put that in the order of conditions.
All right.
Anybody have any other questions?
No.
All right, not hearing any others, we'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
I'll second.
Moving second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And I will entertain a motion to issue a standard septic repair order of conditions with the additional notes for the PVC pipes.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Moving second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Oops.
Thank you, guys.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
I'll see you next time.
Yep.
You'll be here, I'm sure.
254 Pleasant Street?
Yes.
Might as well open that one as a continued hearing. It's up to you if you wanna watch, look at this one, or,
I'll look at this
I
one.
was gonna say, looking at this pile, I think we'll look at the one.
Take your pick.
It's
Oh,
easier.
Welcome, thank you for continuing the hearing, and I'm glad to be before you again. It's been a little while on this project.
Mm.
All right. The status of this project, we hope to meet before ZBA in early March. I'm not sure what the date is yet. We had our initial hearing with them, and then due to multiple factors, we haven't been before them again yet. But the drainage has been reviewed by the review engineer for this project through ZBA, and that's Arthur Cabral. I've provided him with additional information based on his initial comments. I think most matters have been resolved based on the additional information I've given him, but I'm awaiting his feedback just to be sure of that. What we have for this project, we have changed very little since the last time we met.
The notes.
The 22-acre site overall, there's 10 acres of uplands, and not all of that will be utilized. We have a combined 2 lots, which brought us through the whole process, again, with every department that was pertinent. The client, KJ Irrevocable Trust, is proposing a lay-down yard for their steel. You may have seen it. It's rather very noticeable right now, but I heard as of last Thursday, they've contracted with a fence contractor, and they are in the process of moving steel that they had up front here a little towards the back, and they're gonna put up, it's either a temporary or permanent, I'm not sure which yet, fence with screening, and that will provide the agreed-upon screening from the road, so they can utilize the property. It may be a temporary, as I said, but it will eventually be, as shown on this plan, as well as the entire site, but it'll be a privacy screen. So that's the update on the activities on the property. They have not completed their stormwater system in the back. It's a constructed wetlands. I've done multiple inspections on that through all of last year, and as of most recently yesterday. The inspections are required by Natural Heritage when they're working on the property without having the chain link fence buried 6 inches below ground. And that was just to ensure that the siltation control was keeping out any possible Blanding's turtles that might be migrating onto the property. And the siltation control has been updated and repaired and replaced. It wasn't always intact. It's a large site. There's approximately 800 to 1,000 feet of siltation control across the property. But I've asked my client to stay on top of it the best he could, and I believe it is up to par. Less some area in the front due to recent activity, which I mentioned to him yesterday, just to shore that up. The two buildings that are proposed on the site, just as we have presented before, up on the front left, if you're looking at it from the road, that would be their office. And they have a little Quonset building to the rear. Excuse me. In the rear of the property, we have basically doubled the size of the constructed wetlands. Excuse me, they call it pocket wetlands. It is over-designed, but rather than trying to go through multiple repetitive iterations, we've kept it at the size that's presented on the plans. And that's also a very conservative approach because the steel in the yard may act as a impervious surface, even though it's kept off the ground for the most part. And the material used in the yard, after it's been packed down for a while, may also lose some of its porosity. So the constructive wetlands is actually designed for a runoff value across the laydown yard of 98, which is pavement. So, and it meets the peak rate of runoff pre and post construction. So we've designed for a worst case is what I'm trying to say. We've added a turtle nesting habitat, and that was at the request of Natural Heritage. I gave you that earlier today, John, if I could just pass it in now too, please. My apologies, I should have sent that earlier. We did receive a determination from Natural Heritage, and they have a few conditions, but it is a conditional no-take. And that was similar to the original project when it was one lot. They took a closer look at this because of the size of the property, and they required a full habitat assessment, and that was completed for Natural Heritage, and we received that letter at the end of last year. But there will be an additional turtle nesting habitat shown, and that is, again, within the 50-foot buffer to the BVW.
Walter, can you explain what the no-take means to the commission members?
Yes, to the best of my ability, the no-take means that the Natural Heritage has determined that the habitat for the Blanding turtle is not on the, within the limits of the scope of work.
It's on the property, but not where you're planning to develop.
Yes, yes, exactly. They may migrate across land that is in this area, but in order to, and they've conditioned that, in order to ensure that they do not come across the property and therefore face some imminent destruction. The chain link fence about the property will be buried 6 inches below ground. And at the front of the property, at the advice of Natural Heritage, we have a couple of what's called J-hooks. And that actually is supposed to, if the turtle followed along the outsides here, turn them around and send them back. And they say it works, so we'll put that on there just to help turn them around. They can go up to about a mile a day or more. I'm not an expert on them, but they can get around. You're not paying attention to them, so. This road is a huge threat, for the turtles, but the road's the road. And there's other species, you oftentimes see turtles, crossing the road that get hurt and so forth. So hopefully this will keep them turned around. But primarily the wetlands habitat that was identified for the Blanding's turtle is considerably to the west or to the north. And if they migrated this far, they're looking for more of a sandy.
So hopefully those
Warm
nesting
area.
sites will draw
Exactly.
them in and they won't go any further.
Exactly, right. And if they decided to nest there, we have them spaced out. Hopefully enough, Natural Heritage, I hope they agree. They're far enough apart because they have predators, and if a predator finds eggs
One
in
area,
one,
but-
they may just, so we're not gonna put them right next to each other, but, within reason, I can still shift them around a little bit. There'll be an access through the fence here. And this has a special rubber gate on the bottom. The best I could come up with in order to keep the turtles out, is we can't bury the gate. The client had some thoughts of possibly using further upland in this direction, but conceded that that might be a little difficult, and has just shown this area that they would like to use. Excuse me.
Do you know what a construction time frame is? Have they,
Well,
I mean, with an early spring, looks like it's coming this year. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's their game plan or not.
it is. It is. They're a very busy and very large company, and how they transport the steel is not easy, and they can move it from project to project, so it's really project dependent. There is no, best I can tell, any real method of arrangement in the yard. They have certain pieces that they keep together, but once those come out, you might find I-beams that are removed, that are off the ground. They're supported on other I-beams. You may find that they came across some 4-foot pipe that is just laid on the ground because they can't put it on top of the I-beams, or else they're gonna roll off the I-beams. So, best I can tell, they only keep the pipe directly on the ground. But they know their business, and it's a contractor's yard, it's a lay-down yard, and the privacy fence will be all the way around on all the sides. Not necessarily in the back, because there's obviously no view for anyone in the back. The work within the 50-foot buffer, as John had mentioned to me the first time around, it will require granting a variance to work within that 50-foot area. And it was granted the first time around, and I hope it is again. It's simply for the nesting habitats and also the outflow for the constructed wetlands, which on this sheet you see, originally it was about this extent. Now we've added this, basically doubling it in size. I was gonna keep the forebay in the center, but I decided to put it down to the end. That way, the entire yard will drain into this grass channel. The water will flow this way into the sediment forebay, over one weir, and then over another weir at a lower elevation. It meandered through the wetlands, and all the same species are proposed in that area. The elevation is still 6650 for the very bottom on the low marsh. The outlet has been designed to retain water at an elevation of 67 feet approximately, so we can keep some water in the wetlands. Also, this round of drainage analysis, I went through the Thornthwaite Thornthwaite method. I had to double check that, it's actually, that is correct, the Thornthwaite method. I'm not saying it too well. The calculations that I've looked at using that method was to determine that there would be no 2 dry months, consecutive dry months in a row, which would not be favorable for the species in the wetlands. And the calculations show that there may be a shortage of rainfall, and with that method, it determines the evapotranspiration, which might be greater than the amount of rainfall. However, the soil moisture makes up the difference and carries the wetlands, so there would be no more than, I think it was 1, maybe 2, but 1 month of dryness, which is backed up by several other lines of evidence. During my inspections last year, I did observe, there was one inspection on August, I wanna say 12th, where there was a dry, low marsh. The soils were still moist, but there was no visible standing water. But before and after that, there was some water in the low marsh, and we had a dry season last year. So again, I feel that I've conservatively kept this low enough that we will be able to have very viable and successful wetlands. Another important factor is that the groundwater table is notably high in this property, which brought us to putting this together in the first place. We have numerous test pits. We have located the wetlands. The BVW is roughly about at an elevation of 67 to 68. So there is moisture sufficient throughout the year to support the wetlands at that elevation, which further shores up my conclusion that we've set this at the correct elevation. Speaking of the BVW, thank you for granting the last extension for the ANRAD, I think it was ORAD or ANRAD, which I realize I think is coming up about March 5th this month. So during this meeting also, I would request if we could please have 1 more year for an extension in order to keep the project viable. I do foresee wrapping this up entirely within the month of March. And to your question about the construction schedule, I think they'd like to get to it ASAP. And they will be moving forward with it once they obtain their special permit from the ZBA.
If I could just speak about the extension. He was granted the extension and then filed this new notice of intent. So that gives him 3 years after the order of conditions is issued. So you'll have those approved wetlands as part of this order of conditions.
Oh, yes, great, thank you, John.
Yep.
Thank you. So the request will not be necessary in the
Right.
future?
And that's provided the commission approves it.
Okay, all right, thank you, thank you. We have numerous detail sheets backing up the construction, test pit logs, all the stormwater structures out there, including there's a lighting plan at the end. We've added 1 light to ensure there's ample lighting in the parking lot. It'll all be downlighting, most likely LEDs. There's 1 or 2 wall packs proposed in the building, but there'll be very limited lighting.
Would it be safe to assume that the lighting you're proposing is complete opposite of what's across the street?
It will not be as bright. They'll be very limited compared to what is being currently used across the street. There's 2 lights on the rear of the building, then there's 1, 2, 3, call it 4, 3 parking lot lights and 2 at the entrance. So we have a total of 5, and these are poles. Again, they're downcast, and on the rear of the building, they should be downcast also.
Them up in the corner of your drawing?
Yeah, it's just a rough example of what it would look like.
Those would be the poles, but the ones on the building would be the same? Or has that not been determined?
Nope, the ones on the building would be what we call a wall pack. They're smaller, they would have,
It's still laying
it's called like
down,
an
not
island.
necessarily out.
Exactly, yeah. And it is into the rear of the yard, and we would be sure, not to upset any neighbors with that lighting, but as the calculations show, there's very little lumens at the property line, if any. But it will be far less bright than
What's across the street now?
the neighbor
Um,
across the street.
It's a tool shop, manufacturing tools. I wanna say like a tap and die type,
Tool and die or whatever, yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And it was missed in the site plan review of the downward, so it's
More out than down.
Glaring.
Yeah.
and I don't think there's too many complaints coming from Route 24, but I'm surprised
Yeah.
that they're not blinded by it, but it definitely stands out at night.
Mm-hmm.
But there will be far less lighting on this project, 'cause it's just simply not required. The size of their parking lot is in order to meet zoning, but they only have 3 or 4 employees.
Yeah, it's
Maybe.
just a drop
Yeah.
point,
Yeah,
yeah.
but it's understood, because if they ever change the use of the building, they would have a more than ample parking lot for that size building. They have 15 spaces up front, and we even had to add 5 over here off the driveway, which most likely would not be used, but it was necessary to meet the code. They'll have very limited impermeable area on the property, and it will all be handled by the stormwater structures. We've also taken into consideration a comment that a neighbor made. A nice couple came in and they had some questions about the drainage on this side of the property. I've checked the grades along this side, and we have an existing grade of 73 that comes onto their property, meanders in and through like this. We're proposing to meet it with 73, but also to put 2 low spots here in order to make sure the water does direct itself out to the ditch in the front of the yard. We have a bioretention cell shown to take care of roof runoff. Not absolutely required, but it is nice to treat any of the particulates coming off of the roof through that area. The stormwater wetlands, they're designed to do that too, but there would have been a drainage pipe as previously shown, roughly close to 350 feet long, that would have been maybe too close to the surface. So given the activity on the property, we've elected not to try and cast that water to the rear, but to actually treat it right here, infiltrate it, and some runoff would follow the natural course of the ditch in the front of the property.
Will the building have any vehicles inside?
Good question, John. There may be, we've shown a garage door over here. There is 1 floor drain required because we're gonna have 1 service bay. And that would be if they needed to bring in, say, a forklift and work on it, one of their own automobiles if they had to work on it. They also are proposing to store the forklift out back, maybe work on it out back, but they will have one bay on the rear of the building. Most of the first floor is gonna be storage, filing, papers and so forth. It's not gonna be a shop on the first floor, other than most likely just around that one corner of the building where the bay would be located. But they will have a floor drain, and as required, because they have an overhead door, that floor drain will go to a tight tank, an industrial wastewater holding tank, which will have all the bells and whistles on it, and any drippings that come off the vehicles are captured by that drain, and eventually, when the tank gets 3/5 full, an alarm goes off, and they're notified that they have to pump it out. It will also have the same for the Quonset building over here, because that will have a concrete floor. And again, any runoff from this building, the stormwater, constructed wetlands, is actually going to treat any of the metals that might come off of a galvanized roof, for example. But they have very limited impervious surfaces, once again. They'll have a gate at their driveway right here, and from basically the building back, it's gonna be a processed material, which they definitely need for this type of operation, because flat-out pavement just wouldn't hold up, and concrete would be well beyond reality, dollars-wise, in order to construct. We prefer the processed material too, because it does offer some permeability. And also reuse of materials. Any questions?
No.
John,
All set.
anything?
No, I gave you a report, and I think the concern I had mentioned in my report was the grading and drainage for the neighbor there, and Walter did go over that, but I think we can reiterate it in a special condition for in the order of conditions. And also, I had anticipated that the zoning board engineer would have his report completed, but we don't have that yet, so my recommendation to close really should not be that, and it should be left open until we get that report from him, but that I don't think Walter has to come in and present something as soon as we get that. And if he concurs with everything, then we can just close it at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, that's agreeable to me.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah,
They're expecting it shortly
Yes.
anyway.
yeah, I actually ran into the consultant at the town meeting the other night, and he said he was up against a bunch of things, and he wasn't
Yeah.
sure whether he was gonna have it all finished in time, and was it gonna hold the whole project up if he didn't, and I kinda gave him a pass and said, I don't think it's going to, I think we can work around it and move it forward. So I
Good.
think if we just close it next meeting and
Sure.
Sure.
go that route, and that would we finished it, so I'll entertain a motion to continue till the next meeting, which is the 15th?
15th.
15th?
Okay, I'll make that motion.
No, second?
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you very much.
And you
ladies
don't have to,
gentlemen.
Yeah, and you don't even
have to come.
Thank you. I will let
Unless-
you know the progress that we make with ZBA.
Yeah, and
I'm
if
not
the-
sure yet when their meeting is gonna be held.
If the ZBA had a lot of issues, they had to make a lot of changes, then I'd let you know. And you, of course, would know that anyway, but let you know that you better come in and just explain them. But if it's just pretty straightforward, you don't have to come in.
Understood, thank you, much appreciated.
Just one quick question.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
The activity would be limited to the daytime, right?
Yes.
The nighttime lighting would be rather dim, so there wouldn't be too much nighttime activity, correct?
Right, they should not be operating at night unless maybe they had a special delivery,
Okay,
where they might have to park it in the yard, but their operation, their business usually is between 8 and 5 o'clock.
okay,
Yeah.
fine.
And then they didn't understand, the size of the parking lot with all the lights, but there are very few lights, but it is
Mhm.
required, so.
Yeah, okay.
We've held that to a minimum,
Mhm.
knowing that there is some sensitivity there.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, thank you so much.
Appreciate
I
it.
appreciate your time.
And we have 541 Walnut Street.
Now, this is the subdivision called The Farm up off of Walnut Street, and the hearing was continued to tonight so that the engineer could provide me with copies of a Form A plan out at Walnut Street that would show a conservation easement extending onto the Form A lot due to the isolated wetland that is at the entrance to the road. It extends the 50-foot buffer over onto this Form A lot, which wasn't part of the subdivision. So they provided that and a copy of the application. And as a fail-safe, the order of conditions will say that if that Form A plan is not recorded at the Registry of Deeds with that conservation easement on it, the work cannot start. So that, I think, will be the final guarantee that the conservation easement will be recorded.
That's what the Form A is?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, good.
So, having received that, I'm recommending that you do close that public hearing and issue an order of conditions.
Okay, having that report, I will entertain a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make the motion to close the hearing.
No, second motion?
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Moved, and I will entertain a motion to issue the order of conditions.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
All right, item number 4 is the 24 Pearl Road wetland violations. And I was able to verify that the plan that was prepared by the engineer was accurate. What I did ask the owner and the engineer to do was to make that plan into a conservation easement exhibit plan, so that when we drop the conservation easement, it'll refer to that plot plan, the two of them will get recorded, and the restoration plan will make reference to that conservation easement plan. He didn't have the time to get it done for tonight's meeting, but I anticipate that within a couple of days we'll have that, so definitely at the next meeting. The way the weather's going and everything, I think it's gonna fall right into when we want them to start doing the restoration anyway, so I think it's good that we had this little bit of lag time for the winter to take care of the details on this. So I'm recommending that we continue it to the 15th and finalize it that night.
I'll entertain a motion to continue.
Motion to continue?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
All right, and for some discussion, I received a call from one of the people who lives on Wendell Avenue. Wendell Avenue is on the interactive property map copy that I gave everyone tonight. Wendell Ave is that white streak, dead center bottom on the plan.
Okay.
On the map that I have, it's colored, but there's this faint line that you see there. On my colored map, it's red.
Looks like an L.
It's an L and extends beyond the end of Wendell. That's a paper street, and the town of West Bridgewater owns that parcel. The person whose property is surrounded by this other white shape is driving his truck down that dirt road into his property from the back. And since it's a paper street and it's not a public way, I believe it may be a case of trespassing. And so what I'm suggesting that, if the commission agrees, is to send him a letter asking him to show how he has the right to use it on town land that's not a public way, and see what kind of, maybe he has an easement over it, maybe he has a deed that says he has a right to use it. But just because it's a paper street doesn't give the general public the right to use a paper street. It can only be used by people who have a deeded right to that paper street. So if he's not able to prove that, and I'll ask him to provide that for our next meeting, then it would probably require no trespass order, and then also signs of no trespassing. So this is basically just information to keep you appraised of where we're headed with this, but I've received a number of calls about it, so it's something that needs to be addressed, and I thought I would let you know this evening where we're at with it.
Trying to figure out why he would use it, what the advantage is.
I think he doesn't have room to get all the way down to get behind here, so it's easier to go in here. I'm just not, I'm,
I mean, can he get in off this? I mean, I'm trying to figure out where his
North
access
Elm,
is.
North Elm Street is,
So
he
he
can
can
probably
get in-
get in there.
Yeah, is this a barn or a house or?
the front structure is along, it may be a multifamily type of thing situation where there's a number of family units living together.
Yeah, okay.
May not be
What this
apartment,
pool
but-
is it a pool or a jungle
Pool.
gym? Pool? Yeah, it looks like there might not be enough room to get in here or around that way, so the only way to get back there is,
I don't know what's back there, a garage or some kind, huh? Well, it doesn't matter, I'm in agreement with
yeah, I think,
sending a letter.
yeah, let him prove that he's got a right to.
Yeah.
And if he does, it would probably be a right just to use the paper road, not to cross town
That is-
property.
That isn't part of it.
Yeah.
Paper
The
road.
paper road isn't the spur, is it? It's just the straight shot in?
I think according to the recorded plan at the registry, it would be
It
a
goes-
straight shot from the white line that you see.
Right, kind
the-
of.
I
Basically
mean,
an
is it
extension.
woods?
And it just goes straight. Yeah, it just goes,
He's just cut a path through there or
It
whatever?
It may have been an old cart path and,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just improved it enough, but,
and then
You
he
could-
figured, take a left, and that'll put me where I need to be.
Yeah.
and you can see the faint lines that run kind of on the outside of that property. It's
Mm.
very, very faint line.
Yeah.
Turns up pink on the
The
colored
mapping.
map, but you can see that's a sizable piece of land with a couple of streams that flow through
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
And there are some paths out there that four-wheelers use. And so, to me, it looks like a pretty nice conservation parcel to take a look at and maybe do something with in the future. I mean, we have a lot of things going now, but
Yeah.
in the future, look at it like it could be a useful parkland or conservation area.
John, I'm a little naive. Could you explain what a paper street is?
Yes, when, before the subdivision control law went into effect, which is the statute that gives the planning board the authority to approve new roadway construction, design, and the drainage that goes with it, and all of that. It used to be where a surveyor and an engineer could lay out on a map a whole bunch of lots with a street system on it, and quite often they would disregard the fact that there were wetlands, ponds, and streams in the way.
Okay.
And when it tried to get built, they realized they could only go so far and they had to stop.
Okay.
So the lines remained on the plan, and the pavement stopped well short of the end of those things.
Okay.
So they,
look good on paper,
So
hence
they-
a paper street.
paper street.
Okay.
And it's generally still, if it's noted in a deed that you have a right over that paper street, it's still an access, whether by foot or off-road vehicle, you have the right to use that paper street, but it only if it's written in a deed. So that's how this gentleman may have some
Yeah,
rights, but
Okay,
it doesn't seem likely, but I do want to give him the benefit of the doubt.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then
Is this
last,
Elm over here?
Yeah, North Elm.
North Elm, okay.
last on the discussion items is I received a call from an abutter on Harvestwood who had taken some pictures of flooding at the back of her property. And she indicated that Mr. Peters has created a earthen berm that runs parallel with her back property line. And between that berm and her property is standing water, which is a result of the damming up because of the berm. It won't allow the free flow of water that sheds across the property. And it's now backing up onto her property. So this is going to take some more investigation. Again, I'm bringing it to your attention because it has been publicly disclosed that there's an issue out there, and we need to deal with it when we hear those complaints or receive information like this. So my thought would be to contact Mr. Peters' engineer and explain what I know and see if he's able to bridge the gap between Mr. Peters and the Conservation Commission that's probably developed due to the enforcement on the corner of Spring and Harvestwood, and see if there's some information he can provide to us about what can be done about it.
Be nice if it could be drained or be allowed to shed before mosquito season starts, because that's going to be
This
a
falls
great
within
breeding
the
ground.
purview of conservation, something like this, I guess. I don't know where else it would go.
It's, that's the gray area that's I'm struggling with,
Yeah.
because if you are blocking the natural flow of water and creating an impact on the wetlands, which are directly behind the
Sure.
Harvestwood
Right.
property owners,
Yeah.
then it does get into our purview. If it's not impacting it, and it's on his own land and outside the wetlands, then it wouldn't be our jurisdiction. So it needs to be looked at a little bit closely, and again, I'm cognizant of the fact that Mr. Peters has a right to do things on his property, and as long as he's doing them correctly, we have no issues.
Sure. Is there big activity out there, or this is just something
I believe that over this last summer, he was receiving fill material from different construction companies that needed to dispose of their unused fill, clean material, that kind of thing, but needed a place to dump it, and he feels that he can use it in whatever future plans that he has for his property. So I think
Gotcha.
he allowed it to be stockpiled there.
Okay.
So I'll keep you updated at the next meeting.
You'll be in touch with their engineer, his engineer.
Yep.
All right. I think that's all in John's report. Anybody else have anything else?
Not a thing.
No.
I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. We're closed. Not a record, but still before 7:30.
Pretty
so
efficient, I
that's-
would say. Pretty efficient, to say the least. Didn't get our parcel.
No, but the town has spoken.
Yes, that's a
Yep.